Sihalalisa, hello sanibonani babukeli, and welcome back from your festive season break, and a very happy new year to all of you. Wishing you a prosperous 2014. Igama lami ke ngu-Alisha Ntombi yakajali. Mbukeli sesiphindile phela sabuya nohlelo Yilungelo Lakho. It's your right sinisakazela bukhoma la kumahamba phambili SABC 1 eMzansi for sure. Mbukeli ukhumbule ngokuhamba kwesikhathi phela asikuvaleli ngaphandle, sizokuvulela phela nawe ithuba ukuthi ubambe iqhaza odabeni sobe silidingida namhlanje. Indaba yethu inamba yethu yase studio 011 714 6918 noma uzame ku 714 6919. Uyazi ungasithumela ne-email ku consumer@sabc.co.za. SMS the word right to 33726 noma usithole ku Facebook na ku Twitter. Siqhubeke ngodaba lethu lanamhlanje mbukeli. While many debt collectors do things by the book, the heavy-handed or questionable debt collection tactics of some of them have raised concerns. In violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practices laws, these debt collectors could use deceptive, unfair and even abusive means to recover monies owed by consumers. Now, consumer rights bodies are urging consumers to fight back against suspicious debt collection practices by lodging complaints.
Ukugaxeleka engxakini zemali seyinto eqhelekileyo nehlala phansi wonke ubani. Isimo esinzima soqoqosho sibangele uninzi ukuba lungakwazi ukumelana nenhlawulo zamatyala abo. Khawube nombono ukufikelwa ngumnxeba oqoqa ityala osemsebenzini, kutsalwe imali kwi-akhawunti yakho yebhanka kungekho mthethweni, okanye kubekho imali ezitsalwa emvuzweni ungakhange waziswe, i-garnish orders ngolwasemzini. Obu bubomi obuphilwa ngabantu abasematyaleni, bambi bathi bagrogriswe ngamagqwetha kwaye banyamezele indlela ezingenalusini ezisetyenziswa ngabaqokeleli matyala. UNomsayeni ngomnye wabo uthi yamothusa indlela awaqoqwa ngayo umqokeleli wamatyala. Wamiswa kuhola wendlela sisithuthi singaphawulwanga sisithi makabuyise imoto yebhanka.
I didn't expect that treatment. Bengicinga ukuba bazongimisa kahle sikhulumisane, because even though bengikolokda nginama areas mara bebafanele bangi-understand.
Emva kokuthathwa kwesisithuthi waphelelwa ngumsebenzi. Umkhuseli wamalungelo wabathengi u-ELLIAS uthi uNomsa waba lixhoba lomkhuba nentlonti esetyenziswa ngabaqokeleli matyala. Endaweni yokulandela umgaqo osemthethweni wokuqokelela amatyala, aba baqokeleli baxhaphaza abathengi abangazinto ngamalungelo abo.
Indlela esebenziswe debt collectors but high right asemthethweni, because it's either you take the car by voluntary surrender or by court order. So if the consumer says, I don't want to hand over the car, you can't force her to hand over the car. Understand? Or you can't intimidate her. That's a prohibited conduct.
Ukutsalwa kwemali emvuzweni nako ukuthi kusetyenziswe ekuqokeleleni amatyala. Oku kusemthethweni kodwa kukhona umkhonyuvu ukusebenzisa lendlela ngobuqhophololo. UKOBUS ingcali ekupicotheni imali ezitsalwa ngokungekho mthethweni uthi zininzi iziganeko apho imiyolelo yokutsalwa kwemali emvuzweni ifumaneka ngondlela mnyama.
The trend we are picking up is that corners are being cut. The consumers out there, some of these guys have 7 or 8 garnishee orders against them. Now, for a guy that earns 7,000 Rand a month, if he has 7 or 8 garnishee orders against him, he's going to be left with nothing to take home at the end of the month. So basically, garnishee orders are being issued without the necessary steps being taken in as far as, listen, can this consumer pay these amounts?
Okukuthi kongeze kumthwalo wamatyala imali nathi aqhubekeke engenasiphelo. Ubongoza uluntu ukuba lulumke. Abantu bayacelwa ukuba bayiqonde lemikhuba esetyenziswa ngaba baqokeleli. Ngokomthetho, umqokeleli osemthethweni akavumelekanga ukuba aphathe gadala labantu abasematyaleni, aqoqodise okanye agrogrise, bazenze amapolisa, onothimba okanye amagosa enkundla bengengawo. basebenzise incwadi ekubonakala ngathi zezasemthethweni kodwa zingezizo. Basasaze iinkcukacha ezinganyanisekanga zesimo sezezimali zalomthengi. Abathengi abarhanela ukuba bahlangabezana nokuqokelelwa kwemali ngokungekho mthethweni bayakhuthazwa ukuba bafake izikhalazo kwi-National Credit Regulator kwinombolo ezithi 0860 627 627. Kuvuyisile Mdoda, Yilungelo Lakho.
Siyabonga kakhulu ngalo mbiko esiudidiyelwe nguye Uvuyisile Mdoda. Manje ke ukukhuluma kabanzi ngalolu daba lwethu masamukela izivakashi zethu umbukeli sinayo usisi LULEKWA MENGCANE okhulumele iCouncil for Debt Collectors, sibe nayo uJulie Visagie yena ongummeli, siphinde futhi sibe nayo usisithoko Nchabeleng obhekene namalungelo abathengi. Ladies, a very happy new year to you. Thank you so much for joining us on our very first live show this year. Ladies, help me understand. Let us understand the term first. The legal aspects. What is the practice of debt collecting?
The practice of debt collecting is once you have a debt is to collect the debt from the debtor, basically. And there's the Debt Collecting Act makes specific provision for who can be a debt collector, and he must register for debt collector if he's not an attorney, and who can collect debts. That's it.
All right. Singathanda ukusichazela sesiluleko.
Ngithanda ukuqala kowesisi Alicia nakubabukeli beyilungelo lakho.
Siyakwamukela.
Okokuqala nje ngoba uJulie besethilo i-debt collector ngumuntu oqokelelela omnye ityala ezawubhatalwa ngokwenza oko ngaphandle kwamagqwetha ke ngoba i-attorneys zona zireporta kwi-law societies zazo ezikwi-provinces apho i-attorneys zipractice akhona, kodwa thina njenge-Council for Debt Collectors silawula i-debt collectors okanye abaqokeleli bamatyala abangengawamagqwetha.
Okay.
So zonke izikhalazo ezingabe ziza ngabo ziba zisiziswa apha kuthi.
All right, now, is there a monetary board for lama debt collectors?
Iba yiyo i-Council for Debt Collectors.
Okay, and what
we like i-ombud ye-debt collecting.
Okay.
Ngoba into esiyenzayo siqala ngobabhalisa kuqala ukuya ngomthetho oyi-Debt Collectors Act ka-1998 i-Act 114. So eyatshoyo ke ngelo xesha uba wonke umuntu ngaphandle kwegqwetha nabasebenzi begqwetha bafanele ukuba babhalise kuthi before 11 zika-August ngo-2003 uba bebavumelekile uqokelela amatyala ngokusemthethweni. So kunawo ne-code of conduct ke imigaqo-siseko abafanele uba they adhere to that code of conduct uba baze qokelela ityala kumnawe bebe bebhalisile kodwa ungabhalisanga is a criminal offense ukungabhalisi kodwa umuntu eqokelela ityala.
Awusichazele ke iprocess yokuthi uze ube i-debt collector kuza kanjani sisi nokuthi uzuthole i-accreditation?
Uze ube i-debt collector ufanele uba ugcwalise i-application form esinayo esikwazi uba umuntu simthumelele yona mhlambi ngepost okanye ngefax okanye nge-email abane-access yazo. And ezo application forms zidependa uba mhlawumbe umuntu ngabe ukuthi yi-one man business like a sole proprietor okanye yi-CC noba yi-PTY, but ke umuntu uyarejistara ukuthi ngoba gcwalisa izo forms kube ne-fee ebhatalwayo ngulowo orejistarayo. And sibe simnika i-certificate se-registration just to identify lo muntu lo kuba khona ne-ID card esibanika yona uba xa efika eluntwini angafiki nje arorisa abantu engafuna uzichaza bongubani na. So into esiyenzayo leyo ke no investigator izikhalazo mhlamba abantu abanazo, and siyakwazi uba sibe ne-disciplinary hearings all over the country because siyi-regulator throughout South Africa.
Any complaints in regards to debt collectors abantu beza kunsisi?
Fanbize kuthi.
All right, khawusixelele ngaleza conducts obusithetha ngazo uba they need to adhere to.
I-code of conduct very kakhulu xa nifumanisa uba kucatshulwe kule insert kucatshulwe kuyo i-code of conduct etshoyo uba umthengi ufanele baphathwe kanjani, angahoriswa and angahlazwa ngoba ufumanisa uba mhlawumbi umqokelelo wamatyala uzofika mhlambi emzini wakho afika apaka imoto ebhalwe debt collector. So wonke umuntu ngokuyabona ba wena uyatyala so uzofunwa zi-debt collectors okanye emsebenzini umuntu xa sefika afike ezoqokelela ityala kuwe. So into ezifana nezo nento ze-phone ke into ezinezi ba umuntu ufana bayazi ba uvumeleke uba afowunelwe xesha bani akuvunyelwa uba afowunelwe xesha bani because ufumanise uba nasebusuku bakufowunela nge-private call and kube kuthi ufanele uba ubulele ngelo xesha mhlambi ke just after 9 o'clock ne before 6 o'clock in the morning abafanele babakufowunele kodwa ke njengomthengi bangabe ungayazi lonto and then you'll be taken for a ride.
Sisithoko, in your understanding ukusebenza nabalungelo abantu, what kind of cases have you dealt with on a very basic level?
Sure. Ama cases Alicia engidile ngawo ama cases azwisana ubhlungu kakhulu ukuthi you know you sit back and you ask yourself ukuthi how can another human being treat umuntu ngalendlela. You know, I have a case engangidila ngayo yase a migrant. This poor lady is a domestic worker. She went under a debt administration order with the understanding yoguti she's gonna have a peaceful life because iya deduct her from her salary. Only to find that the administrators have actually tripled the original debt, total debt ebe owa. You know, and now she's paying and paying and paying, but she sees ukuthi uma kufika ama statements she doesn't even receive statements. She must go and collect the statements from the administrator and fanele agibele nalapho and the process mayifika bamthatha serious because she looks so shabby and you can see ukuthi you know she doesn't understand, and if they don't have a closer speaking person on that day attendwa, you know, and she goes back home twice, thrice without being assisted. So when I got into the matter, I had to make sure ukuthi they answer up to what did they do. How can a debt from 18,000 become a 60,000 debt? Uyayibona le nto. And that particular insight, it's a very real situation. Lapho umuntu ecabanga ukuthi yena she's driving the car, she's made arrangements, she's speaking to the bank, but the bank is already taking other means without informing her, stopping her on the side of the road. What if and the car is not marked and these people are producing anything that comes, you know, shows that it comes from the bank, and it could be anyone. So your life is threatened, let alone the fact that when now you are being embarrassed, you know, maybe that comes later. But what about you being treated as a human being?
And because we all have human rights.
Have consumer rights.
Asibambe kanjalo sisithoko kwamanje asithi ukuthi shrink aseyitolo mbukeli, please ningakhohle ukuthi phela nani ningazwakalisa eyeni imbono ngokuthi nishayele ucingo ku 011-714-6918 noma uzame ku 714-6919. Ungasendela i-email ku consumer@sabc.co.za, usithole ku Facebook na ku Twitter. Ungayindawo siyabuya khona manje. Samgele futhi babukeli usabheke uhlelo Yilungelo Lakho la kumahamba phambili SABC 1 eMzansi for sure. Remember ungasithinta la e-studio i-number zethu 011-714-6919 noma 714-6918. Now Julie, please explain to me now, this you will not believe, I got this from a very smart individual. It shows just how people are not educated when it comes to this. What is the difference between the sheriff of the court and a debt collector?
Sheriff of a court is appointed by the Minister of Justice, and he's appointed for various divisions of the court to execute documents, orders, serve documents that are issued by the court. Okay, in other words, a summons
not
that is
by
issued,
data.
Not by data. It's issued by it's a summons or a notice of motion. It gets served
from the magistrate,
or from the High Court, depending on, and he serves the documents. Once he will even execute orders once an order has been granted by a court to attach immovable property. He will then go and attach the immovable property. In the case of the insert that we saw now, only the sheriff of the court could have attached that car if the lady didn't want to voluntarily surrender that car. The credit provider, they would have had to have obtained a judgment, an order, in other words, an order from a high court or from a court, and that court would have been sent to the sheriff, and the sheriff would have gone out and tried to approach her to take repossession of the car. Not in the middle of the road. No, they also have a code of conduct. And if they don't comply with the code of conduct, you go to the sheriff's board to report them. But generally, sheriffs adhere to the code of conduct.
All right, so it's very, very two different things. Who is then under, who are debt collectors? Who are they underwritten by? Police, the Hawks, who?
I sheriff yona I reporter e court I appointwa minister ukuba isebenze issue orders from a court. So I debt collectors zona ngoba I sheriffs they fall under I code of conduct eyabo separate kulethu. So a debt collectors it's just under us I council for debt collectors. So nabo bane code of conduct yabo engafaniyo ne sheriffs. And I debt collectors for that matter as uJulia said I debt collector ikwazi ukuthi I attach I property yomuntu ngoba abana order. I court order should come from I court through I sheriff izo attach property nobantu.
All right, now
debt collector is he's there by virtue of an act that was issued by the Minister of Justice. He has to comply with the terms of that act. He has to register as a debt collector, and there's a code of conduct. But he is not there to execute orders. He's just there to facilitate a debt collecting process under a certain. But he cannot, if the person doesn't, the person who's collecting the debt from doesn't want to comply, doesn't want to cooperate with him, there's nothing he can do. He then has to approach a court. The credit provider has to approach a court who will then obtain an order and then get the sheriff to serve the court order.
All right, let's take our very first caller. Sorry, Julie. Let's take our very first caller. And don't be from Pimville. Welcome to Yilungelo Lakho, Sisi. What's your question or comment?
Umbuzo wami sisi mina ngifuna ukwazi ukuthi ingabe kusemthethweni nabo ukuthi ama furniture shop la thatha kwama loan like mina ngingathathi loan ase one of the furniture shops and ngoba nama problems of paying but angizange babhadale angizange sakhona ukubhadala my full installment ngabhadala half of it and I made arrangements with them but babefaka ama interest and they ended up sending me a debt collector that woke me up at about 5 in the morning. Bashaya gate, a huge white guy who just said, if you don't pay this amount of money, I will possess your house. And mangiti no, I will pay. Wavelu wathatha iphepha walinamathele gate baphuma bahamba. So yona ndlela benza ngayo nabo ukuthi mele bas embarrass ngale after you've made arrangement with the store ukuthi you will pay this much and then they still send somebody in the morning to wake you up and threaten you that way.
Sisintombi ngicela ulalele nangu sisithoka uzoku-addressela inkinga yakho ne?
Ngiyabonga.
I-case kaNtombi is a typical case yezinto ezenzakala ebantwini on a daily basis. You know, one of the consumer rights is to be treated with dignity. Ngamanye amagama uhloniphekile ngoba umuntu. That's a start point. Now, if utreatwa ngaleyo ndlela, it is not right for you to keep quiet about it because you feel guilty ukuthi ukweledile okanye awazanga ukhokha. Situations happen and you need to be able to be treated with respect. And now that we have the debt council for debt collectors here, ngithanda uku-encourage kakhulu ababukeli ukuthi they must take ama numbers wabo and use this body. We have Julie here today who is saying here is your legal route. Fanele abantu baphakame because the fact that you did not pay as you contractually arranged does not necessarily make you less of a person.
Absolutely true. And with that said, what does the Consumer Protection Act say in regards to this? Does it fit in there anyway?
Well, it depends on the type of debt that we're looking for. But we're looking at, you know, I think I didn't understand very well, but I think she was talking about a debt relating to a credit agreement, which is governed by the National Credit Act. And that is very prescriptive on how to, you know, before you can terminate a contract and what you can do and what your rights are.
Absolutely. Well, basically what she did, Julie, she went to go and get furniture from a shop and then she couldn't pay the agreed contractual amount. And then she arranged with the shop, but they still sent somebody to go and collect this on top of her having made arrangements and had been agreed by the shops.
That is in contravention of the National Credit Act. You may not do that. If you want to terminate terminate that agreement, you must send out a notice in terms of Section 129, which clearly sets out what her rights are if the consumer doesn't want to proceed with that act. But he can't apply those type of tactics. He may not apply. The credit provider may not apply those type of tactics.
If I may add there, Section 129 that Julie is referring to is not even a starting point, because the starting point would be they'll either SMS or they will call you to remind you that we realize that long even before the arrangement. The minute one payment ingafikanga, they will remind you either via SMS or by the call. And thereafter, letter the Section 129, because that is more formal to say, listen, we realize now it could be even after 60 days bengatoli imali from you, but they can't say you've skipped Section 129, because then that will threaten you as well. Remember, when it says Section 129, obviously it's one kind of a particular route according to the National Credit Act. You understand? So abantu, they need to be able to, just as much as we say we have rights as consumers, we need to be able to take seriously ama SMS kanye nama calls eswatholayo. And once you make an arrangement, if that arrangement fails, you're the first one that needs to pick up the phone to the creditor and say, I thought I can be able to make the payment, but something has happened. What else can you do? Don't leave it. Don't leave it. Actually, incline to say yes.
Just to get back to you, in terms of the National Credit Act, debt restructuring, there's a whole chapter on debt restructuring. So if you've entered into a debt restructuring, they cannot take any further steps in terms of they have to abide by that debt restructuring. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Let's take SIBUSISO. SIBUSISO, are you still on the line with us? SIBUSISO, siyakwamukela ehlelweni.
Njani sisi?
Siyaphila bhuti wami, sicela wehlisa ivolume yamabonakude wakho khona sokuzwa kahle bhuti, bese uyaqhubeka nombuzo noma umbono wakho.
Okay. Bengifuna ukwazi la nami at one time I was under administration.
Yebo bhuti.
So I eventually ended up paying off vele onke lama debts lawa that I had. But I recently had one of the creditors, but I'm still under administration. And the company that they're mentioning is actually a company that recently gave me a refund because I had overpaid.
Okay, ungasinike igama layo bhuti.
Okay. So now the issue for me is, because apparently there is this document, it's a you something that you have to get from the administrator. Oops.
Okay.
When it's done, when you are done paying, I never did get that. So I just want to know, how does that administration work?
Okay.
What document do you have to get to ensure that you can produce that as having paid?
All right, SIBUSISO ngicela ulalele sokuphendula mesibuya ekhefini mbukeli okwamanje ngeke asithi futhi ukuthatha nje ikhefu siyabuya khona manje ungayindawo. Siphinde sikwamukele futhi mbukeli usabukele uhlelo Ilungelo Lakho. It's your right to siza kwebukhoma la kumahamba phambili SABC1 eMzansi for sure. All right, SIBUSISO impendulo yakho ngicela ulalele nangu uJulie. Julie, he basically paid off his debt. He was on administration, but he still hasn't received like a paid up letter basically, and is looking for credit now. He can't obtain any of those documents.
Okay, he must go to the person who was appointed as his administrator and obtain the letter and bring the necessary application in terms of Section 74 of the Magistrates Court Act to have the administration reversed.
All right.
If he can't find his debt, then I suggest he must go to the Law Society, because normally it is an attorney that was appointed as an administrator. Go to the Law Society. They have a list, they have a roll of all attorneys, and he'll be able to get his contact details.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Sis LULEKWA, our focus today is mainly on the unscrupulous debt collectors. What ethics or practices really make them stand out? What are some of the practices abawenzayo awenza ukuthi kuze kuthiwe cha laba cha baphula umthetho ngempela?
Kufana nalo ebegrogisa usisintombi. Lo ofika nje ngo5 o'clock ekuseni umuntu elele. Then afike abeka amaphepha egate exelela emthreatenisha uba uzawuthengisa indlu yakhe. That is one of the things. Okwesibini sifumana mhlambi complaint yoba umuntu ubizwe imali egqithisileyo kuleyo ebeyikwelita. Okanye ke umuntu uya engaregisteranga ofuna isikweliti emntwini, which is the first criminal offense. And then qinisekile bazonke debt collectors iziregister leyo nathi apha eMzantsi bajonge i-code of conduct and bayazi strict sanctions ezikhutshwa yi-council uba ngabe umuntu uphule umthetho.
Sizokhuluma ngazo. Ithi ngithathe uSipho Ndima kwaZulu Natal. Sipho sakwamukela ohlelweni, qhubeka ngombuzo wakho bhuti.
Unjani sisi?
Siyaphila bhuti wami, sicela uqhubeke nombuzo.
Usipho Ndima Moses Koti ntawamakhanda.
Yebo.
Ukubuza lana sisi. Uthunywe ubaba uYende. Uthi ubaba uYende wathola incwadi from kwaGarnish order ethi kolota 5287. Wayibhadala leyo mali cash. Last year futhi usethole spam letter ithi akabhadale futhi leyo mali. Kumele enze kanjani makwenzeka kanjalo?
Okay, bhuti wami, sicela ulalele lapho kumabona kude wakho bhuti Sipho. All right, we're going to get into the garnishee orders, but ungamphendula sisithola.
I'm just wondering ukuthi uthi garnishee order now, because the garnishee order can only be served to the employer who will then deduct salary yakho. So angitholi kahle ukuthi is meaning garnishee order in real, or is it a letter of demand for isikweleti ebekade naso?
Yeah, because ilokhuzana garnishee order is already a forced collection on behalf of your salary. Okay, but Sipho mhlawumbe ungaphinda usithumele i-email usichazele kahle kahle sikhona. But let's talk about other things now. We just spoke about a very serious issue here in terms of dealing with all right, in terms, we spoke before the break, we spoke about the no, ladies. All right, give us some examples of the high cases that you've actually come across. Let's start there. Before we get into this argument, before I confuse myself.
My cases ain't dealing now, and with the type of work that we do. Is someone being kicked out of their house? You know, mautola umuntu atole I threat yoguti today, bagnigeza say 14 days to get out. Auna lauzo yakona. You know, umuntu to start with, uyazi, the consumer knows ukuthi uyakweleta, uyazi ukuthi une nama areas, uyazi ukuthi una arrangement, probably angayigcinanga. But you know, uma isithatha the legal route in terms of going to a court, bese ku obtainwa eviction order, and then bese kuya auctionwa, I still believe ukuthi the consumer still has a right yokuthi throughout the process abe eya informwa ukuthi how far and what is it that is happening. Iba wesike uma athi sekhishiwe endlini ya auctionwa yathengiswa emva angatshelwa kwa result even after 60 days ukuthi ithengiswe kanjani ngamalini usakweleta okanye kunemali kufanele abuye kiyo. So in one particular example, all multiple of rights are being violated against this particular right yakhe yokuthi abe informed at all times, right yakhe yokuthi anikezwe ample chance to make alternative arrangements if esuswa kuleli khaya okuthiwa uyalikweleta evuma naye azi ukuthi uyalikweleta. Ample opportunity as well to know ukuthi uma ngabe kunesikweleti esisasele kule auction yenziwe ngalendlu, how is she going to arrange to repay imali yale ndlu esakweleta okanye le moto esakweleta, because it's painful ukuthi ubhadala indlu ungahlali kiyo simply because it was auctioned at a lesser price. Well, because the contract besesekuwe egameni lakho, it still remains being you ozaba liable for the shortfall yaleyo nto le. So those are the type of cases that are. Now my passion is to be able to give abantu information and help them all the step ukuthi bakwazi ukuthi ukusuka la ngiyaphi because mawuhleli ungenalwazi ngempela awuzuya ndawo.
All right, now ladies, I've got that point that I wanted to put across before, and this was what we spoke about during an ad break. Very interesting that we are today talking about registered debt collectors today, Sis LULEKWA. What about the unregistered lenders or mashonisa labantu abazothumela ulaqhasha ukuthi azokusika umlenze bezo collect debt yakhe?
All right, ukhuluma ngento ezimbili. All right, lenders or mashonisa abake bafanele ukuthi babe registered kwi National Credit Regulator. Thina sijongene nalo owayesophula umlenze abana ngathi basolakala qhosha usidumo xa ekwelida kufumanisa bafuna bazokuphula umlenze kodwa ke i-debt collecting since 2003 it has been treated as a profession like any other profession but i-debt collecting it goes as far as it's a negotiation actually because i-debt collector is a middleman phakathi kwe-creditor and also the debtor so they also try by all means ukuthi bakhulumisane nalabo abakwelida ukuthi bazokhokhelwa ngokwenza lokho ngokuthi umuntu that's the way you make isonke etafileni.
But isn't this common emalokishini sisithoka ukuthi labantu ngempela they don't adhere to these rules uthola umashonisa uzokunika imali mesefuna imali uzothumela osipho lapha nezinto ezithize abazokuthola endlini ngo4 ekseni unganakile.
Alisha iqiniso ukuthi elokishini labantu bayazi ukuthi abazi ukuthi kufanele ba register or uma ngabe bayazi ukuthi kufanele ba register they choose to ignore it.
Absolutely.
You know because they know that once you register there's a code of conduct that you need to follow there's certain guidelines that you need to adhere to so the most easiest way use ama threats. Do you know as well ukuthi abantwana baya kidnap umntana ama kidnap simply because yime ngikweletwayo ifurniture yakho iyathathwa iyohlala kwamashonisa ze imali ize ibuye. You get my point? Ikhadi lomuntu liyagcinwa i-ID iyagcinwa and all these things are happening in the township now probably someone is sitting there ulalele uthi marusi sithoka how can asukume azothi yenzeka elokishini. It's prominent.
It is.
Ifunganga ngendlela yokuthi
even ukuthi sisibona labantu abantulayo ababa victims of this vicious cycle of misfortunes each and every time.
Believe it or not, abantu abathola imali yesasa that the government is meaning for them to have something to live with for a month ayininganga but ngikholwe mangithi kuwe bayaboleka nabo and uma beboleka baboleka ku the very people who are not registered the very people who will use the laqasha way of collecting their money. Now you ask yourself as a consumer expert and as a consumer activist you ask yourself ukuthi why should umuntu aziputhe in such a position. We are born. So just as much as we're talking rights, we need to be able to take responsibility as well.
Very true.
How do I treat myself first before I can start accusing the next person? So we need to be able to get a balance, and it is my mission to be able to say to people, get real.
All right. Usisithoka hayi okwamanje mbukela sithi ukuthi futhi siphinde sithi jikelele eitolo. Please don't go away. Sinamgele futhi babukeli before we continue with our discussion ithi nginikhumbuza ukuthi phela nani ningalibamba iqhaza ngokuthi nisishale ucingo ku 0117146918 noma 7146919 uyazi email siyayithela futhi ku consumer@sabc.co.za ungasithola na ku Facebook na ku Twitter. All right, Julie, I want you to we're talking about mashonisas of which is it's quite common in the location, but now how does a consumer deal with that kind of situation where you have an unregistered lender altogether? Where do you start?
Well, you shouldn't have to deal with him at all because if he's an unregistered credit provider, then most of these agreements that we're talking about are governed by the National Credit Act. Then it's an unenforceable agreement. So he doesn't even have to pay because they haven't done they haven't followed the procedures of the National Credit Act.
I think many people are smiling at home now, Julie. But what would a person do in that situation where the debtor is actually intimidating them with threats in the location? And as Togo was saying, it's very rampant. It actually occurs in the location.
Then I would report him to the Debt Collecting Council because most probably, or 99% of those debt collectors haven't been registered at the Debt Collecting Council, and the Debt Collecting Council can have them arrested. They are offences, and because they have to register. If you collect debt for money, for a fee, you have to register with the Debt Collecting Council. And if you don't, it's a criminal offence.
All right.
So they can go to the police, or they can go to the Debt Collecting Council. And I think they work in conjunction with each other, the Debt Collecting Council and the police.
And the police. Please explain that relationship.
Kubalulekile ba abantu sisebenzise abantu aba reputable like aba registerishileyo uqonda ba umuntu ubangabe ngumashonisa lo mashonisa fanele uyazi ba uregister ku National Credit Register unganqameli ba ufanele ufumane le mali uzothenga whatever
gratification we can't deny.
That is the thing. And also i-debt collector xa ifika kuwe ezibendishule eqaleni basibanika i-ID cards ba umuntu afika athi ndingululekwa ndizawuthi zocollector kuwe elatyala bulikwelita i-Council for Debt Collectors. Uyaqonda, so umuntu akwazi ba ayazi ba lo muntu ndisebenzisana naye from the onset, because I remember this other time sine i-workshop, i-consumer workshop KZN, and lo tata waphakama wathi ukuba ngaba nithi abantu bangasibhatala imali zethu njengomashonisa ngaba abasinkonqozela ebusuku bezofuna imali ngokuthi nasithini bathatha i-ID books zabo ne-bank cards zabo bazigcine kubo, of which that is illegal yona ngokwayo loo nto le. So thina sisebenzisana namapolisa uba umuntu xa kufika i-debt collector engabhalisanga kuye afike uyayireporta kwi-police station esekufutshane naye, and then bese usinikezwe case number sibe si-investigator leyo tyala.
Okay, all right. So kahle indaba iqala kunini. Asithathe uNombulelo ePitoli. Nombulelo sakwamukela ohlelweni. Nombulelo? All right, we seem to have lost uNombulelo. All right, sister, have you ever dealt with a case yomuntu osuka kumashonisa and ufuna usizo?
Yeah, it's very, very difficult
to
start with. Ngoba ka registeranga umashonisa. Lo muntu uzokutshela ngomashonisa, but believe me, akakwazi nokuthi akunikeze igama lakhe. Because kuba ingathi angisho yinto ya underground. So uyazi ukuthi makaqala ethi uyami expose naye already seka kwi risk. We understand leyo nto le. So in most cases umuntu it's so unfortunate ukuthi ugcina so uthi.
So you carry that burden because you know you got into it in the first place.
Yes. And the only advice that I can always give kuleyo situation ukuthi mbadale lo muntu mawazi ukuthi impilo yakho is being threatened. Mbadale and never ever do such business naye, because when we have abantu aba registered, why uzhlupha ukuthi usuke uya emntwini ongekho registered?
And umuntu registered uzofuna ama bank statement, uzofuna ama proof of residence, uzofuna yonke.
Yes, I know, but then should give you comfort ukuthi you are doing business the legal way. If ever u attractor yilento illegal yazike consequences. Can you see how unfortunate it is?
Very, very true. Is there anything you want to add, Julie?
Yes, you see, the reason why the National Credit Act is so onerous, and you know that you have to do a credit assessment, is to stop exactly what's happening. What to stop these unscrupulous lenders from taking advantage for poor people. That was why the National Credit Act came into being. So to go and do business with them is actually counterproductive. You actually going completely everything against what the National Credit Act wanted to do, to assist the people that were the victims of those people.
And it makes the case a bit difficult.
It does, and mangingavumeleka nje uthi ngisho Alisha ukuthi uma uthi umuntu uthi uyasaba ukuya the legal route, khumbula very same National Credit Act iyabonisa ama options ukuthi uma ngabe awusakwazi ukubhadala, what is it that you can do? Una voluntary arrangement for status to say, creditor, this month kuzoba nzima ngicela uku-arrange ngale ndlela
in advance.
It can be a matter of paying half of what you're supposed to be paying, or arranging ukuthi whatever will be in arrears will be spread in a number of months. That's the simplest way. Unendlela yokuthi you can actually approach a debt counselor and say to the debt counselor, you know what, this is my baggage, I've got all these 9, 12, 15 creditors, please deal with them and let me know how the process works. And then uyakwazi ukuhlala phansi naye u-debt counselor explain what is it that is going to happen. So on a protection when you do things ngendlela yomthetho, but you do not have protection if wenza indlela elula, because zonke lezi zinto ezisuke zizelula zisuke zingasabi mnandi ekugcineni.
Kunzima ngempela. Asithathe uNokuthula futhi kwaZulu Natal. Nokuthula siyakwamukela sisohlelweni.
Yebo sawona sisi.
Yebo sisiqhubeka ngombuzo.
Yebo mina ngine contract no autopatch.
Ungasitshela igama le creditor sisi?
Okay. Ngine contract nenye yamaselula ka 200 rand airtime.
Yebo
bebenginika yona njalo monthly. Yebo kuthe kusuka nje yayinyuka imali bako 336 ngelanga be 516 ngelanga ngeke ngibale kuningi nje ngichitha isikhathi. Ngafika ngafonela sengibabuza ukuthi hawo sekwenze njani na basebethi bekhona umusic ngathi mina awuza kanjani ukuthi bekhona umusic kaze ningibuze mina ukuthi umusic uyawuthanda yini na abangasho ukuthi bathi baqetha bazocancel.
and then bayeka inyanga eyodwa elandelayo yaqhubeka imali ngithe ngisuka mina ngangivala i-stop order ebank yabo ukuthi bangayibambi imali
sisinokuthula le mali bayithatha lo khuluma ngayo bayithatha how often bayithatha month end or during the month
no bayithatha mhla ka-1 nje angithi vele le airtime ibingena mhla ka-1 njalo nje monthly angithi
okay
nale mali bayithathe kanjalo bayiqhube naye airtime kube into eyodwa nje yabo
okay so kahle kahle uthathe i-cellphone contract ma ezanelokuzana ezane-airtime every month so bakucharge i-amount a1 end of the month but bona bese bethatha imali eningi
ekuqaleni bebengithatha 234 ngithatha ngokuthi u34 rand wama-charges la awakhona bengithatha kanjalo bebenza kanjalo nje
i-agreement yakho mamnokuthula bekuyini nesitolo ubuzokhokha malini month end
beku-200 we-airtime nje kuphela besivumelana ngakuthi bazonginika u-200 we-airtime kuphela
okay bese wena ukhokha malini
bese ngikhokha 234 namasenti sengikhohlwe amasenti amanye lana amanye akhona 230 something nje yabo
okay ma alright
bakwenza lokho angithi
yebo
kwajika nje base bengitshela ukuthi khona umusic bengangibuzanga mina ukuthi ngiyawuthanda yini lo music yabo
yebo
so mangibabuza mina ukuthi hawu nasele ngifakela umusic ningangibuza ngithathelani imali yami ningavumelekanga nami bangangiphendula ngithi
yebo ma
baqhubeka bathatha imali ngokuhlukana kwegaba ukugcina sengo 917 angabe ngisazi mina lokho bese ngivele ngiye ebank ngibuyisa imali yabo ube ngireverse manje sengikhathele ukungiye ebank yabo ngireverse imali ukuthi koze kube nini sidlala lo mdlalo ngababhalela incwadi
yebo
yokuthi lento abayenzayo iyona engenza ngenze nje kanje ngathi ngicela bangiphendule writing akaze bangiphendule ukuze kube namhlanje
okay ma manje ugcine wenza njani manje awusekho in contact nabo
ngicela nje bethatha imali nami ngiphinde ngiyilande ebank sidlala lo mdlalo
okay ma ulalele lapho kumabona kude wakho
Consumer Commission afake i-complain about it because indaba zama-cellular phones umthetho we-consumer protection uyasinikeza ilungelo lokuthi uma uzwa ukuthi usuyasindwa uyikhansele i-contract although umuntu kufanele aqaphele ukuthi kuba ne-cancellation fee yokuthi uma ngabe mhlawumbe ubethe and all that
Mbukeli yo asithathe our final commercial break siyabuya khona manje sinamukele futhi babukeli sesisondele emaphothelweni ohlelo kodwa lwanamhlanje ake siqede ngendaba yethu ngicela nje uqale ngosisinokuthula
mangithi kusisinokuthula into ehlakaniphile angayenza ukuxhumana no-consumer commission lapha azokwazi ukufaka khona lesi sikhalo anaso because kuyabonakala ukuthi uma ekhuluma nabo laba be-cellular contract akuzwanwa yikwethi bagcina badlala umdlalo which can be very dangerous angazigcina ezithola blacklisted angasakwazi ukuqhubeka ngempilo you know so makafake leyo part if ufila strongly ukuthi une case because aka understand ukuthi this is not what they agreed on makayibhale phansi angene ku consumer commission abanikeze leyo ncwadi bakwazi ukum-investigatela because on a serious note komunye umuntu 500 rands can be nothing but to her it's a lot of money so ngiyamgqugquzela kakhulu ukuthi angamanayishinja
ahlale kanjalo angaloku edlala igame nebank all right let's take our final caller anonymous welcome to Yilungelo Lakho
yebo sanibona
yebo siqhubeka ngombuzo
okay ma ngicela ukubuza kushuthi mina ifiance yami yakweleta abanye ama-engineers but uma esefika endlini esezo-repossessa but babekhandelele imoto uma thatha yonke impahla esendlini although ngithambe efika ama-attachments ingane bayifica yabatshela ukuthi impahla lezi zikama but bathatha-ke even noma sebefika bezozithatha bafika ngikhona but they take all my goods even the TV engithathe last year ngo-December they took it off
anonymous
isimo esinjalo ngingenza njani
ima anonymous bazichazile bakubonisile i-registration labantu ukuthi bama-debt collectors bakuboniseni bavane bafika qhubeka
the day abafika ngayo ubhuti owathi uqhamuka kwaShifu he was so rude wengafuni ukukhuluma lutho athatha into azoyikhuluma naye kwakhe kumanje ukuthi azolanda impahla kangoba ingane yazi yathi ngisho ngilanga bezofika bezolanda impahla yabachazela ingane yathi ngasho ngathi izimpahla ekamama baxabana nengane ngoba ingane yayikhanda engafuni ukunderstand lo bhuti but ngiyenzile follow up ngaya kwaSheriff and sengiya nama-proof bathi sekulate endlini angina-TV angina-fridge angina-water anginalutho izinto abayidaqaza phasi even ukudla babekhipha emafrijini babekulahla phasi
Okay, sis nangu sisiluleka uzokuchazela ukuthi ungenza njani manje nesis. Okay, siyabonga.
Okay, ngiyabonga.
Umama makakhuluma ukhuluma ngokuthi fiance yakhe. Engicabanga ukuthi uma ngabe akashadile nalomuntu okokuqala nje akuvumelekile ukuthi bangathatha impahla. Ngaphandle kokuthi mhlambe bekunga umuntu abashadile naye in community of property kulapho kudikanelwa yonke into ewe. So okokuqala kube wrong khona lapho ukuthi labantu laba bafika bazothatha lezo zinto. Okwesibili ukuthi i-registration akakho sure ukuthi labantu laba reputable. Like ngoku sithethile sathetha ngo sheriff we court ofanele produce i-court order. Okay kuthiwe kuya repossesswa ke. I-debt collector cannot repossess. Ngoku asazi ba i-debt collector libizo repossessa kuye nobangu sheriff nobangu bani na.
So uhambile ku sheriff ayesephetha ama documents bathi sekulate.
Kodwa kufanele ukuthi umama ngizacela ukuthi mina uzothi athatha ama nombolo wethu emva kohlelo and then kukhona legal officers zethu pha and then bazokwazi ukuthi bamcebise ukuthi ufanele enze njani.
Alright nazo zikhona lapha.
So ukuthi bazo from the legal perspective ukuthi bamchazele ukuthi ufanele ukuthi athathe amanyathelo amaphi ngoba kalo xa ezahamba ye kwa sheriff kuphinde kuthiwa kusekulate and then yonke lento asazi ba iprocess yakho ibinjani na and ibingobani bona ababazileyo.
Thank you very much Luleka. All right ladies, let's wrap this. Where can consumers anywhere in the country, especially the poor countries, the poor communities, where can they find any kind of information to actually help them deal with such issues?
You can approach any attorney, that will help you, any attorney. I know that the Law Society makes, documentation available. And
it's at a cost, Julie. These are really, really struggling people, the poorest of the poorest. What can they do?
The Law Society does have a pro bono. It requires certain attorneys to work pro bono, free of charge.
Yes.
So, and they can contact the attorney, the Law Society, and then go to the appropriate attorney in the area. They are obliged to do a certain amount of pro bono work per annum. Big firms hold the pro bono department that they do work for nothing for the whole year. So they can approach those firms and those firms will help them.
All right. And where else can they go, ladies, for that kind of information?
Ngithanda ukusho ukuthi khona manje information iyonke indawo ngempela poor or not. amaphephandaba akhona ayasho ukuthi thola usizo ngendlela enje. I-radio, SABC is doing a lot of work through i-radio ukhuluma nabantu to say to them, listen, nalu usizo lo ngalithola khona. Umuntu makangathi it will never happen to me.
Nabantu siyazifaka number.
Yes, even right now laba basebenzayo basemsebenzini angithi laba basekhaya bakhona babhekile. Let them take the numbers so that they can be able to be phela manje isikhathi sokuthi umuntu athi ngempela akanalwazi okanye akhalele nje ukuthi yena njalo azwelwe usizi ibe information sinikezana ngayo imihla namalanga. Funda ulalele and act. Uma ethi uye usheriff usheriff wathi it's late, it must have been late indeed, because impahla ingathi ithethwe when you go after 21 days you can't. On the very night you can't sleep in that house. That means you scream and shout and you look everywhere ukuthi usizakala kanjani.
Wow, thank you so much, ladies, for joining me. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Well, we've now come to the end of today's show. Ngithanda ukubonga izivakashi zethu ngokusipha isikhathi nolwazi labo. Ngibonge nani babukeli ngokuthi phela nibe nathi kuze kube manje nokuthi nisishayele ingcingo, nisendele lawa emails and Facebook and tweet messages. Please do join us again next week Friday from 1:30 to 2:30 in the afternoon for another live consumer discussion of the week. Lapho sithemba ukube sizobe sidinga udaba lama e-tolls ukubukela impinde ezinhlelo zethu masihlangane la kumamba phambili SABC1 every Monday morning from 9:30 kuya ku 10:30 rather. For myself, Alicia Intombi Agajali and the entire crew and team, it's goodbye. Masale kahle.